it was very important to show Bolivian faces, like we have this beauty that is very unique to us as well. And I think that it's super important that as a whole, we start to understand beauty as again, this spectrum and not just these Eurocentric heteronormative ideas that have been sort of like the rule for so long.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I feel really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very excited to be able to talk about my practice, to have this exchange with you. And yeah, I'm just very excited. Bolivian in Paris.
Well, I'm glad you're here. She was showing a body of work that she did recently called Madre. That is it's really, really strong. And I can't wait to show you guys a little bit later. But just to kind of kick us off, I want to introduce you to our audience. So for those that don't know you, kind of introduce yourself, where you come from, and just give us a little background on you.
Well, I'm from Cochabamba, Bolivia. I think that I think that I am a storyteller. I really always felt this big need to express myself. Originally, I thought my first love was words, language. I fell in love with language, and I thought that I was going to be a screenwriter, probably. So I studied in Argentina, visual communication. And that's where I realized that in order to write a good script, I needed to know how an image was constructed, because, as a script is only, a script becomes an image. So I needed to know how images were constructed, how they work. I'm not one of those photographers who tells you, oh, I grabbed my first camera when I was 6 years old. I wasn't even the photographer during my holidays. But I think that, and I didn't know image. I didn't, the most embarrassing thing that I can admit was that I was very, very confused the first day that I learned that like movies are not shot chronologically, that they are like fragmented and put together. So that was like my level of knowledge of image. But I think that, but when I grabbed the camera on the holidays to learn how to make a picture, my love was immediate. And I think it is because I'm a very exuberant person in general, with how I talk, with how I communicate. But the camera the camera commands brevity. The camera commands you to really be focused, and you have like just one frame where you have to generate a whole story, a feeling, an atmosphere within a single frame. So I loved that challenge, and I loved that directness that I don't have in other aspects of my personality. And after that, of course, I really wanted to acquire visual literacy. I think it's very important. We are very visual creatures at the moment. I even see little children like scrolling nowadays. We are so plagued by images that, of course, we have a good knowledge about them. But you can always go deeper. And I think that's another thing that really fascinated me about learning about the images, not only photography, like learning about their actual power, learning how responsible we have to be about the images we produce, how we can give them so much meaning, how this meaning can have real impact, And yeah, I just became very fascinated with images. And then I did a master's in fashion photography to cement this love for images. And then I found myself bringing home all these things that I've learned from my time doing a little bit of cinema, from my time working with fashion. And I think that without really having a plan, we carry everything we learn, everything we see, everything we read with us somehow. And I'm really happy that I was able to bring all these things together, and somehow they are present now in my practice, in the images that I make.
I think that's it's very evident when you look at your work. And how do you think you studied fashion photography, correct, in London?
Yes.
How do you think that influenced your work today?
Oh, so I think that fashion really is what gave me a framework of how to approach image making. I used to, when I started making this work, Madre, which is, I would say, docufiction and more of a photography essay. I was in the beginning docufiction.
You call it docufiction.
Yes. Docufiction, because I call it docufiction because I think that I am talking about serious and real issues. But even though some of my images are, more traditionally documentary, I do work a lot with mythology in my work, with these constructed images. Like I would even say that I really think that every image is a construction. There is a big debate within this, within the photography world, but for me, everything is very subjective. So docufiction is the place where I think that I can tackle these very serious issues, but it also gives you an entry point that maybe traditional documentary work wouldn't. I'm gonna go back to this reflection, but I'm gonna explain first how fashion comes into my work. What I love about fashion is that it doesn't hide away from the fact that you are constructing an image, that you are representing something. The colors of the outfits, the textures, the backgrounds that you choose, all of these are chosen, and they are there to provoke a reaction or to say something. So I really like this idea of construction. I think that I've always gravitated towards fiction because in Bolivia, even to this day, although the panorama in the last, I think, 10, 15 years has opened up a lot. When I was growing up, everything that I would see was photojournalistic or traditional documentary work, which, again, I think is very valuable. But I always wanted to create worlds more than reproduce the ones that I was seeing. So I thought that fashion was the perfect space to do that, because fashion is all about constructing worlds, constructing these illusions, these fantasies. I love the artifice. There are people who shy away from it or want to eliminate it in their practice. But I love artifice. Like, I think it's one of the most beautiful things that image making gives you. So I used to, when I started making this work that is more serious, I thought that it would undermine my work if I said that I had a fashion background. And for a while, I would be like, oh yeah, I did a master's in photography, and I wouldn't specify that it was in fashion. But
yeah, there's a weird line between commercial and art photography. They're like, oh, you're a commercial, so you don't do art. And you're like, no, I kind of do, but there is a construction of it. Yeah, I like what you're saying there. There is a construction of an image that happens there. And I think of a photographer that's one of my favorite is Gregory Crewdson. He does this masterfully. You wouldn't call it fashion, but there's a construction of an image, that's happening. And I love where you're going with that, but you can continue.
No, completely. Like Gregory Crutzen, he works at, to me, almost like a movie director.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
constructs these like beautiful like cinematographic stills, and it's such a like Gregory Crutzen is a great example because like I've heard that some of his images cost more to make than a whole movie, because it's such a big construction.
It is,
But
yeah.
but exactly, that's what I love. Like you can
Mm,
make up a world. Thinking about like Gregory Crutzen, I remember like this woman in the middle of the kitchen, and plants are growing up from are sprouting from the floor. So that's what I wanted to do in cinema. That's what I wanted to do in photography. Like I wanted to make up my own worlds because um, again, where I come from, everyone is registering the world. So as a contrarian, even I will be like, no, I'm constructing my own worlds. But the more I grow up, the less afraid I am of these hybrids. As a matter of fact, like now I don't like purism. I think that everything is very mixed now. Even when you
yeah,
look at fashion magazines, like fashion magazines now have articles about real life things. Travel magazines have fashion, fashion shoots. Everything is very mixed, and I think that's beautiful, and that's really a reflection of our world. Going back to what I was saying before, we are plagued by images, and even if you curate your Instagram or your TikTok, you are looking at so many different images, so many different things that why not? Like I'm more now about integration and actually like what can I take from one language and what can I take from the other? Can I
yeah.
combine them? And I think that's richer. That's way richer, and I see a bit of a tendency of going towards these hybrids more nowadays. Um, but yeah, like the I think that my safe place, the core of the work that I do is portraiture, and for sure, portraiture is informed by my fashion past. Like in fashion, you have to think about your casting. You have to think about every single choice that you make. Like what is the character wearing? What is her? Is she in character? So all these things I would bring to my work. In Madre, I wanted to photograph women, and it was important for me to photograph women from my environment, women that I had interactions with. Like I didn't want to photograph models because I was challenging um, the lack of diversity in Bolivian media, where all we get is these heteronormative looking women who are also unfortunately put in these very like sexist roles. Um, but then when I was doing the pictures of these real women, I was building a character for them. I started with the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene. Like I said, okay, what is going to differentiate my portraits? And that comes from fashion. In fashion, you think about these things like what is my starting point? How am I going to dress them? What does this say? So I really, now I say it very proudly. Yes, like my background is in fashion, and that certainly informs the way that I make images and the way that I even approach the medium.
I think it's fascinating. And how much? I read an interview with you, and you said that research was a big part of what you do. How much does research play into the construction of your images?
Oh, I think that the research is super important. Even going back, like some people, I also had to overcome some prejudices that I had around fashion. Again, I'm from Bolivia. We don't have the big labels. I didn't grow up looking at Tim Walker or like Martin Barr's Gucci. Like fashion to me was something else. So in the beginning, I had this idea that it was very superficial. But even in uni, you had to do research for your work, even if it was like researching the work of other photographers who had tackled similar ideas, even if research was just doing mood boards and getting references. I really think that research is a super important part of making work, any type of work. And especially if you do it for fashion, if you do it like for a shoot, like why wouldn't you do it for the work that I was tackling was very complex issues, very nuanced. And I was tackling a very big thing. Like I wanted to talk about, celebrate the diversity of women in my country and this very, very big dynamic spectrum of femininity. But I also wanted to criticize these patriarchal institutions that influence the representation of women in my country. Institutions like Catholicism, racial issues that unfortunately have led us to like this whitewashed imagery. So I was dealing with these big subjects, colonialism, women issues. So I think that even though like I can say, oh, I'm inspired, I have an idea of what images I want to make, I really had to do important research as well, because I'm Bolivian. My whole family is Bolivian, but I am a white Bolivian with a privileged position. Like I studied fashion photography. I could get out of my country to study. I speak English. All these things make me privileged within my context. And I knew that what I wanted to do was also photograph and be in contact with women with very different backgrounds from mine. So it was a thing of respect and responsibility to inform myself about all these big issues. I would say research to me also means spending time with the people that I'm going to photograph, getting to know them, conversing with them, because at the end of the day, I'm doing work about Bolivian women and I'm photographing Bolivian women. So it's not only about my voice or I'm expressing my point of view, but I'm trying for it to be a choral narrative. So my research goes from reading books, about history, about anthropology, but they also go down to having a coffee with the person that I'm going to photograph, getting to know her side of the story, learning about her day-to-day life. And I think that, again, like even in things that we might think, oh, but you're just shooting a beautiful dress, there is research behind. And I think that research does make a difference. Even if you don't include it in the images, I think that audiences, people that look at images can see when an image is empty or when an image has perhaps all these layers
Absolutely.
of research, of information.
There's one image that you shot that is particularly stands out in my mind, and I can't wait to get to it later. But before we jump into Madre and we start looking at some of the images, take me through what you were looking at and who you were looking at and what you were thinking before you started this series, or were you not? Were you just kind of being pulled into a direction and it unfolded for you? Like, talk to me about what you were thinking about and what you were thinking about when it came to that series. What pulled you through it?
Perfect. This is a good question. I had been living outside of Bolivia for many years. I think like 6 or 7 years. Because I did uni in Buenos Aires, cinema, something like visual communication, and then I did fashion photography in London for like 3 years. So when I left Bolivia, I didn't, as I was telling you before, I didn't have visual literacy. I didn't really know how to interpret, understand an image, look at how it is made or constructed. So it was super, to me, it was like defining to come back with all this knowledge, with all this experience, and look at my context, look at the place where I was born, with these new ideas, with this new mentality. Like, I didn't know about image, and I came back and I knew about it. And I think that I'm quite, I don't get angry easily, but I got really angry when I went back to Bolivia, because I even remember that the Roma, the movie had just come out, the Alfonso Cuarón movie, and Yalitza Aparicio, who is indigenous, was the cover of Vanity Fair. So and I had been living in London at the Vanguard. It was the time where everyone was talking about body positivity and the importance of representation. And so very innocently, I thought like, oh yes, we have so much diversity in Bolivia. I'm gonna go back and like, Yalitza, she's on the cover. Like, I'm sure that this is gonna be reflected in my own context, and it wasn't. All I would see was how full of sexist imagery we are. I would see it on TV. I would see it on the streets, in posters, all these girls wearing bikinis, offering you anything from like parts to fix your car to food. And the same, like I don't come from a place with a big production, but our weekly magazines, they would only feature these girls with only one body type, many times with blonde hair, which it's not common. So it would be like dyed blonde. And I was thinking like, oh, okay, so all the images are whitewashed. All these images are extremely sexist. And I was angry because I understand how we are informed by like these foreign perspectives, but doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in a country like mine, which is pluricultural, like even in the name, we're like the pluricultural country. And where is all this diversity? And I had understood the importance of representation, how important it is to see someone that looks like you in regular media. We talk about this a lot, how important it is for a Black person to see a Black superhero, for a disabled person to know that not all villains will have scars or be, like it's really, really important. There is a responsibility. Again, like one of the biggest things that I'm still learning is like, as an image maker, you have to be very responsible. Try to be as much as responsible as you can with the work that you do. And here there was no responsibility. There was only this very, very alive male gaze. So the project actually started in a very, not very big way. I just wanted to make a series of portraits that acted as a counter, as a challenge to these images. I just wanted to show the women that surrounded me how amazing they were, how they didn't, have to be objectified to feel valuable. But many things happened in between. Like at the same time that I was starting this project, I was also feeling very hypocritical because I was doing a work about Bolivian women and about, our history and its richness. And I was struggling with my own identity as a Bolivian. I felt, I think the word is uprooted. I was struggling to connect to my own culture. I was feeling very foreign in my own country. So it was very grounding to start talking to these women and realizing, okay, like I see myself in them. Even if they come from different backgrounds, like we share these struggles. It's a bond, and that's when the archival images happened in a very serendipitous way. Like my mom, who is amazing, who helped me make this series, was cleaning my grandma's house, and she came upon a family album. And I remember her coming to our room and saying like, okay, so like you're struggling with your Bolivianness, maybe look at your ancestors. maybe look at where you come from. Maybe this will help. And what my mom didn't know is that besides it really being this world, this window that opened that reminded me like, oh, I come from all these very diverse women. I come from this past, which I also criticize because, again, I'm a privileged woman within a very racialized, racist context. So it was important as well to be able to look at that, be critical about that. But also the very beautiful thing was to see this array of femininity in my family album, even if these were women who were living in times where they had so many restrictions. And I think that the thing that my mom didn't anticipate is that I was now a photographer. So I also looked at the images in terms of their materiality. And I loved it. Like, I loved how they would crinkle. I call it the old Photoshop. I loved how there were so many men torn out from the pictures, but literally like torn out. And I was like, oh, what happened here? And my mom was like, yeah, we don't talk about him. Yeah. So I thought, okay, if this is helping me, if this is like rooting me to my history, maybe this is something that I can incorporate into the work. Like I'm talking about our modern contemporary society, but we also have this history. And I thought from the beginning that it was a good thing to have both images in a dialogue. I try to oppose with this work all these narratives that are presented with the label of truth, history, religion, these big things. So for me, it was also like really cool to be able to navigate through these temporalities, like this is Bolivia now, this is where we come from. And by doing these interventions, which now I have friends who work with archive and I understand that it's important. It has a hierarchy within the photography world, but I didn't know back then, which is beautiful. Sometimes not knowing is the way to go. And I just played around. And to me, collage was very natural. I already used it in my work. So it was my way of commenting, as I was saying to you, like it was my way of looking at these images in a critical way. So that's how the project came together. Maybe one more thing that I will add is that the framework that I used to create my portraits was Catholicism. I grew up Catholic. Although my parents were not very religious, I was quite devotional. And I had to unlearn a lot of ideas. Faith is beautiful, but Catholicism is very patriarchal. And unfortunately, it looks at women in a very reductive way. So what I did was like use this framework and took the two women that are representative in the Bible, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Holy Mother, Mary. And I started with these archetypes to address this Madonna whore complex that is not only part of my society, but it's like part of the bigger picture of society. And it was my starting point. How do we, let's start from the extremes. Let's start from this very reductive place that we've been granted. And let's work to understand how actually this is a spectrum. And I would say a dynamic spectrum, how we are moving through this spectrum of femininity and how nuanced it is. But it started out, I didn't have a plan. Like it sounds now everything came together, but I was very chaotic when making it. And I just want to say that like sometimes there is no formula. Some photographers are very organized. I wish I was a little bit more organized when making it. But I also think that you have to follow your gut, your intuition. And sometimes the best ideas come to you when you're already at work, Always allow transformation. Transformation is such an important part of long-term projects, I believe.
I think that's for artists, this is where we live. And this is something I reflect on a lot is we bring order to chaos. And And so it's these two parts of our brains. We have order and then we have chaos, right? And the artist is comfortable in that chaos. They find order of it and they bring it down and they bring structure to it. And a lot of times when you start a series, it feels like that, I think, especially when I reflect back on things that I've made. I kind of start with an abstract idea, and as I work on it, it just kind of starts to find order to it. You find a rhythm, you start to find an idea, you find a question that pulls you, and so on. So why did you choose the title Madre? What does that mean to you?
I like I think that the title, well, first of all, it's such a strong word, no? Like madre, mother.
Yeah. Mother, yeah.
But I thought that it really captured what I was trying to do, which is madre, mother. To me, I know that there are disclaimer. I know that there are some terrible mothers for sure, but the good mothers are probably like, mothers are amazing. I think that like mothers, I respect, admire. Like mother to me talks about this power that women or we. I want to be precise about this because I know that it's not only women that give birth, but like this power of creation, literally it speaks to the power of creation. Create, like, can you imagine like creating life, having something like grow in your belly and come out to the world? So it speaks, and I think that my mom really helped me during the project. Like because I didn't have a team anymore to work with, and back then I wasn't familiar. Now I have a Bolivian community. Now I have friends I that can help me and assist me. But back then, my mom actually became like she became my head of casting. She did makeup. She would drive me around to the shoots. So she helped me, and I love my mom, and I have this very close relationship with her. So to me, mom is a celebratory word that speaks about this power that we have, this power of creation, this nurturing energy. Mother as mother, as motherland, Mother Earth, all this very, very, very beautiful acceptance of the word mother. But I think that it's a double-edged word because for the biggest chunk of history, like for a very long time, that was the only value that was assigned to women. Women were seen as reproductive apparatuses, and your worth would be determined by whether like you had children, you didn't. Still to this day, like in Bolivia, I have a couple of aunties who are very sad that I'm already in my 30s because I lost the train of motherhood, according to them. Or people who, when you say, oh, I don't want to be a mother, they like, oh, but you're a woman, like it's what you're supposed to do. So I really like the word because I thought it brought both those aspects, like my work is both celebratory of the power of women, of our strength, of our resilience, but it's also a criticism of the oppression that we still face to this day. And I thought the word madre has both, like that celebratory, beautiful side, but it's also a reminder of a very small place, of the very small place that we were granted for such a long time within society.
This is going to be a interesting, very philosophical question. And okay. So you're using a camera to kind of reflect, and I know often when I am, and you've referenced looking at albums and other things. When you look through that glass, are you looking for yourself? What are you looking for? Are you reflecting on you, on your own identity, or who are you looking for?
Wow. Okay. That difficult question.
It's a tough one. Yeah. It's very philosophical because I often reflect through it. I'm not when I'm photographing. Sometimes I have a whole series of stuff that's just never seen the light of day, that is just me reflecting. And when you are photographing, you are intentionally limiting the world to a box, a flat one. And often when you make that decision to take a photograph or to make something, especially with a film camera, you are pausing that moment of time, and that is often you're motivated to pull or to make an image based off of what that moment, what that square makes you feel, and what you're thinking about, that image that it recalls in your mind. And so when I'm thinking about your series, and I'm thinking about what you said about why you chose the name, I'm kind of curious what you're looking for.
Okay, I love the question, although it is very difficult.
Okay. And it's a good one. That means it's a good one.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Yes, challenge accepted. There was the first. The first work that we had to do when I was doing fashion photography, was called Mirrors and Windows. And the question that we had to answer was whether photography for us was a mirror in which we look at ourselves, or if it's a window that you open to look at the world, which I think it's the same question that you're asking me.
Exactly.
And I will elaborate, but I will give you the same answer, because I still think the same that I gave to my teacher, which is like, I think it's both.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that it has to do, like, for example, in Madre, in that work, I'm not there. There is no images of me. I actually hate being in front of the camera. I don't do self-portraiture. I don't do selfies. I feel very, very vulnerable on the other side of the camera, which has also helped me a lot. I think it makes me, I think, a more empathic portrait maker, because I know how vulnerable or uncomfortable you can be on the other side. And also I understand the power that somebody holds when they are in charge of making an image of you. But what I find very interesting is that although I don't insert myself in this very real way in my images, of course, my images are always tell you things about myself. Like, this is why I was telling you before, I don't know how objective you can be when you, I don't think you can be objective when you make an image. Yeah. Every decision, every single decision, even I studied cinema, like the train that comes to the station, the first movie ever made, the one that made people run away from the theater. Are you familiar with this, or am I talking?
Yeah.
The Lumiere film, like
everyone was like,
oh, yeah, oh, the train is coming. But they wouldn't have felt that if the camera was positioned somewhere else. It was positioned in a way that it was gonna look like the train was coming straight at you. So even though that is considered like super documentary, and it was like at the start of like our understanding of like image making, all decisions have a big impact on the image, on the final image, and they do tell you things. So I would say the nicest thing to say for me is like, I think that whenever I'm photographing, that I don't photograph myself, I photograph things outside myself, and I like to photograph things that are foreign to me. Like, that's one of the things that I enjoy most about photography, that like having a camera allows you to enter all these spaces that if you didn't have a camera, if you were not a photographer, you might not get close to. I mean people, I mean situations, like when I on a good day, I think that being a photographer can be like being an investigator, because you are investigating things. But even when I'm looking at these very foreign realities, I'm always going back to myself. I always feel that this impacts myself. I feel that whenever I take a picture of someone else, I learn a lot about me. So the same way that I said to my teacher, I think that, yes, it is this window that you open, but you can still see your reflection in the window. And for me, photography is a tool of self-knowledge. I learn so much about myself, not even only through the photographs, but through the act of photographing. Like, how do I approach someone? How do I build a situation? How do I structure work? It all helps me understand myself. Even going back to this, I would have never thought that I could be a direct person. But then I think that my images are very direct. So, I am direct. Maybe not when I speak, definitely not when I write, but that's something that I found through photography. So I really, really think that, I'm going to give you this non-answer that is like, I think it's both. It always leads back to you. But of course, you are always learning about others, about things that are outside of you. And I think that's the beautiful richness of it. Actually, like that's why I love it so much.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great setup to actually start looking at some of the images. And so, what I think this is a good moment to kind of step in there. You said something about being direct. You said you're not sure if you're direct, but you are. And when you see these images, I think it's a really good time to kind of look at them now, because they are powerful. You were using symbolism. You were using. You said you were referencing mythology. You're kind of doing what we call docufiction, and they're strong. And so, like, I thought they were awesome. So let's go ahead and share some. Let's take a look. And when we do that, can kind of talk to me about how you construct the image and what you're thinking when you put together this image. And then you also have a particular way of like lining them up in order to tell the story. So take us through Madre a little bit. And I'll jump in and ask questions as we go. I'll try not to be so philosophical. I'm just kidding, but I think
please,
I love it.
Be philosophical. I think that's way better. Because again, like that's at least why I like images. Because they make you think. Like
they make you think.
Because they have this power and I love philosophy in general. So please let's get philosophical. I would love that. Okay.
So we're gonna go ahead and jump in now. Now we're looking at one of your first images here.
This is the first. This is the image. Madre has actually become a book, and this is the first image. And simply, I think it's a good place to start. Because of course, like it's a cave, and the cave can be representative, can be a metaphor for a womb. But to me, it also leads me back to the super famous cave that we all know, which is Plato's cave, and where we have this idea, this idea of mythology begins. No, like what is real, what is not. But unlike Plato. I don't believe that, as I was telling you before, that's why mythology is part of the work that I do, because I believe that everything is a story. This that I'm telling is also going to be a story. So this is my way of opening up and saying, okay, I'm gonna take the artifice into my work. But so that's where we start. And then I think that this is one of the most representative images, because here we have this amazing woman, and maybe I'm going to tell you the story of some of them, maybe not of all of them. But for example, this is Maria Elena. We call her Negrita. That's her nickname. She's the dance. She goes to dance lessons with my mom. That's where we met her. One day, this is so cute, but I'm going to tell it. My mom doesn't like it. She's like, Marisol, please be a serious person. Don't tell people that your mom helped you. And I'm like, Mom, I hope you understand that it's a luxury. Like I want to brag about it. My mom came back home and she had taken pictures on her cell phone of Negrita, like mugshots from the front, from the side, and holding her hair, because she said to me, oh my God, Negrita, how didn't I thought about it before? She's so beautiful. She has this long hair. And I was trying to reproduce some images that I saw in a museum in Bolivia, where you have cholitas. Cholitas are from indigenous descent in Bolivia. You probably have seen them by now. They're quite popular at the moment. But I had seen these old pictures, old studio pictures of cholitas with unbraided hair. And I thought it was beautiful and very unusual. So I wanted to make a portrait of a very long-haired woman with like her braids undone. And the amazing thing is that sometimes I would, like gravitate towards a woman because she has long hair. But then I sit down with her and I found out that Maria Elena, she's a documentarian. Like she's actually like this super amazing, tough woman, because she's super small. I don't think you can tell it from the picture, but she's actually quite small. But she goes into the jungle for months. She makes documentaries of like indigenous people living in super remote areas. She's an activist, of course, feminist. She's there at every women's protests, recording. So she's an amazing, actually, image maker. And this was the first time that she was going to be in front of the camera. And she was hesitant in the beginning. But to me, it's very important to build intimacy and to build comfort. Because I struggle so much being on the other side, like being in front of a camera, I tried for my subject to feel comfortable. And in the beginning, she wasn't sure she wanted to unbraid her hair, because she always wears it on a braid. But as the shoot went on, and as she realized that it wasn't maybe this scary thing that she thought, she let her hair down. In the end, like we even did some pictures with a little bit of nudity, with a little bit of play. But it's always in this very small environment. Like it's me and my mom and my camera, natural light. I like working in that way because it easily builds this comfort that I look for. But then again, like look at her, and that strength, you cannot make it up. Like that strength is within her. And maybe when you look at this picture, you will not know that she's a documentarian, an activist, all these things. But I think that you see her strength, her regalness. And that's what I was missing in Bolivian depictions of women, like this beauty, this power. And then I have these other images in the book that I like to, so I like to go from, like a real woman, like in the flesh, with all this strength, to these effigies, these plaster effigies of, say, the Virgin Mary. And here, there's always, I think, that's why I want to get philosophical, because I think a lot of metaphorically when I make work. So here we have the Virgin, and I thought I did want to, because I am also criticizing our society, I wanted to talk about things like violence, because it's a big thing in Bolivia, unfortunately, violence against women. But I didn't want to make violent images. I didn't want to feed into that violence through my imagery. So I wanted to be more subtle. So for example, to me, this image was is a little bit, maybe I was thinking like, oh, she's there, she cannot breathe, like maybe there is this idea, this metaphor of like how being the Virgin Mary is like this thing, it's impossible. So it's like this thing that doesn't allow you to breathe. But it's beautiful because you make images and you make them with an idea in your head, but then people see amazing things. A girl told me about this image. Oh, I love it. I love how she's in this plastic bag because that's how she preserves her purity. And I thought that was wonderful. And now I say it as well, like it is what preserves her purity. It can also be, like this oppression. And I like, again, the contrast between seeing a real woman and seeing the depiction of this character that we've learned about that was also, if we go back in history, was also a very big imposition in the whole continent, Catholicism.
I love the contrast between the two. There's a tension between the gaze and the first image here, your angle is just slightly below. I call it the hero shot. And the reason is because that's how most heroes are actually depicted, with their gaze slightly down. And you look at Mother Mary here, and she's looking down, and it shows a kind of a submissiveness, And there's a huge contrast between the two. And I love that portrait.
And things like the skin, or the eyes, like blue eyes. We see this image as an image of, immaculate femininity and what we have to aspire to, but it's so different from.
Yeah. And to hear your interpretation of that image of your mom's friend, you can see the strength and the respect you have for her. She looks 6 feet tall, she looks like she's 3 meters tall, she looks like a hero, you know what I mean? And the way you tell her story, she is to you. And so and I think it's masterful, wonderful. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Of course.
And then there is this interplay that I was saying before, okay, so I'm going to think about what a modern Virgin Mary would look like, what a modern Mary Magdalene would look like. And it's about reclaiming these things. Like I call this the Andean Virgin because, we know now, historical fact, Jesus, the Virgin, although we have these white depictions of them that are popular, and when we think of Jesus, we think of this white man, of Mary, these white women. Where they were born, they were not white, They probably had they looked very differently. But again, like what I'm trying to do with my work in the big picture is challenge these narratives that are just narratives, but have been fed to us as if they were the truth. So this is my interpretation of a modern virgin, but she's Andean. Like she looks like the women in my country and not like a European lady. And the same with Mary Magdalene. I incorporated Andean folklore into my work. So we have a dance in Bolivia that is like the devil's dance. It's called La Diablada. It's actually danced during a religious celebration, but this is La China Supay. China Supay is the lover of the devil, and she's very seductive. She's an enchantress. Of course, she's a sinner. So I like this idea of bringing elements. This is our interpretation of a devilish woman, the mask that she wears. So I like mixing both of those because, again, like religion, Catholicism is very Eurocentric. So I was thinking I think it's very interesting. And I think this is one of the images where you can definitely see my fashion background for sure. How she's decorated, even I think how it's shot. But I like that interplay. Again, now I'm not mad. And I think if I'm talking about a spectrum of femininity, why not have a spectrum as well in the format, in the language that I'm employing for these images. And then we have the incorporation of archival images. And I think that it's very important. I already told you, like, the archival images are from my own family album. So although I am not present there, as there are no images of me, there are images of my family, and I think that's also my way of very literally inserting myself in the conversation. Um, this is my grandma actually doing her first communion. This is what I was telling you. I was fascinated with the materiality. Like, I loved how you can see this texture in the image, and I put a dead bird in the middle. In the beginning, my mom was like, "Oh my God, Marisol, I don't know what you're doing." And now I'm gonna show you a picture later on. Like, for example, she calls it the phallus. So my mom, like, in the beginning, she was hesitant, but at the end, she was like in, and she understood what I was doing and where I was going. And, like, for example, putting a dead bird here, to me, it's like symbolic of, you're accepting your first communion, you are accepting God into your heart. But what does that mean? To me, that's also like a loss of innocence. That's also like the death of your own, like, if now you're going to be subservient to God, it's like you're giving away your power somehow. So yes, I take these images of my family album and I intervene them as my way of, like, countering, challenging my own history, commenting on it. And then I like this interplay again. When we were thinking about the book, my editor was saying, like, "Oh, I think we can start with, like, the more colonial images, and we can start with, like, this archival material, historic things, and then move towards the contemporary moment." And I was like, "No, I want the temporalities to be mixed. I don't want to think about time as a straight line or as something that happens chronologically. There is even, like, this belief in Andean culture that time is circular more than a straight line. So to me, it was very important. The same way that you see, like, a real woman with an effigy, and you can and you can see the difference. I also wanted to see how this image speaks or enters a dialogue with this image, and I think, and I like to play with these things. I always situate these images close by, because you have a dead bird and she has, like, a gun. So did she kill the bird? What does it mean?
This one
Yes.
is what got my attention. This one right here. I was just, it's a very powerful image. And I wanted to understand what you were thinking almost instantly. I was just, because there's flowers worn as kind of a hat or a headpiece, and this very long gun. That's a very strong. I think it's a type of shotgun. It's
yes, it's like
but it's a Go ahead.
No. I can explain the image, but I don't know if you have something specific that you wanted to ask about this image. But I will explain to you.
I want to get in your head. That's why I'm asking about it, because it's one of those that you just mark and circle and go, wow, And this was one of those portraits for me. And so, and then she's wearing white, almost like it's a veil, like there's a lot going on here, and I want you to unpack it for me. And so, let's go ahead with this one.
Perfect. So this is an image that, I love it because this has become, I call it my bestseller image, because it's the image that whenever the project gets picked up, it's the image that people use, and I understand. But as the person who makes it, it's always, to me, for the first time, it's very interesting to see what people gravitate towards, and I completely understand. But what people like to know, because this is probably my most reproduced image, is she's my neighbor. She lives in the floor above where I live in Bolivia. That's how I knew her. But her name is Vanessa. Vanessa is my neighbor. She, I, I thought she was like, I ran into her in the elevator and I just thought like, wow, she's strikingly beautiful. And I loved her skin and I loved her. She's very sweet, which I don't think you can tell from this picture because she was in character, but she's very sweet. And I just thought that she was absolutely beautiful. And because she was my neighbor, I thought that it was going to be easier to, like say to her, oh, can you come for a coffee downstairs? I have this project. I want to tell you about it. And for her, I had a very specific idea. There is an Incan goddess, Incan divinity called Mama Kila. She is she's the moon, the sister of the sun, and she is regarded as the protector of women. She's also like the goddess of the menstruation, but she's the protector of women. And again, the same way that I'm going through religion, and the same way that I'm saying like, okay, not all, we don't have just one way of looking at things. Like I'm incorporating, these Incan mythologies as well. Like, yes, I'm going to give you the Virgin, but I'm also going to give you Incan deities. So to me, this was, again, I wanted to make this picture. It was really important to me because there is a lot of violence against women in my country, like a lot. Like we're one of the countries with the most violence against women in the whole of Latin America, which is a lot to say because it's still a very macho continent. And what I was telling you before, I did want to comment on this, but I didn't want to do it either in a crass way or in a very, I don't know, like I wanted to talk about it, but in a more subtle way. So what I was imagining with her was, to me, this is my way of saying in Bolivia, we have to defend ourselves. The law is not helping us. The government is not helping us. Society is really not helping us. So justice, protection, we have to take it upon ourselves. Like it is our responsibility at the end of the day. And although I don't condone violence, I thought that this was a very, like straight way of saying it. Like, and she gives it to you with the eyes. Like, if you cross me, if you hurt me, if you hurt my sisters, I'm gonna go after you. Like I'm taking this into my own hands. But because it's a woman, I also didn't want to take away from this more traditional form of femininity. So I wanted this contrast to be there. The gun, which is super masculine. You've mentioned like this one, which is especially phallic, I would say, because it's so long. But I wanted to dress her in these very traditionally feminine clothes, and very delicate. And something that I really like is that she's wearing my mom's dressing gown, and the firearm belongs to my dad. So she's actually wearing something that belongs to my mom, something that belongs to my dad. And the headpiece that we have her wear is actually a headpiece that women in Tarija, which is another city in my country, they wear these, the exact same ones for Easter celebrations. So women wear these for to celebrate Jesus. So I thought it was going to be, again, for me, it's about hybridation, about syncretism. So I thought it was going to be interesting to have her wear like a traditionally Catholic headpiece, but interpret an Incan goddess. And the most beautiful thing, which makes me understand that, the truth about any artistic piece is in the piece, not in the person that made it, is that people call it the bride. So many people have referred to this image as the bride. Now, even I do it sometimes because why not? Kill Bill, like a murderous bride. Love it. Love the concept. But I think it's because of the veil and because she's wearing white. But I love it. I never thought about that. And if you think about her as a bride, it also opens up to a new layer of meaning, to a different, to it takes you somewhere else. And I simply love it. And I like that people gravitate towards this image because, I mean, Vanessa, I think she was there. I told you already, she's such a sweet person. But here, I think that when you see her, you're like, yes, I'm definitely not making her angry. I'm definitely not going to cross her path.
Well,
so that's the story behind
you talk
the image.
about this. Yeah, I'm sorry to jump on you, talk over you here.
I was done. I was done.
Oh, okay. But what I was going to say is that this is your neighbor, okay? And you're able to, and you're telling me that she's a sweet natured person, but you're able to pull this kind of gaze out of her. Like, how do you get that out of someone I'm sure she doesn't have experience with photo shoots, right? How do you pull that out of people? How do you get your vision across with people that aren't necessarily like professional models per se, or actors,
I think that first of all, I think that it's very important if you have the time, because I also understand that sometimes, you do a portrait in the street of someone and you don't really have the time. But it goes back to building a relationship with that person. Yeah. I invited Vanessa over. We had a coffee. I told her what I was doing. She already knew that she was embodying this goddess. She knew that I wanted that mix between strength and vulnerability, because I also think that vulnerability is a strength.
Yeah.
And this is a trick that I'm super happy. Like, I hope it helps. Most of the times I work with non-models, and what I found that really works for me is having these non-models embody a character. Because I think if all you do is say like, oh, stand like this or go like this, if you only give instructions on how to pose or the gestures that you're looking for, to me, it's not as effective as explaining to someone a character. Because you said it yourself, she's not an actress, but I think that it's easier. Again, as someone who doesn't like to be in front of the camera, if I am not Marisol and suddenly I am a queen or suddenly I am an old lady, it's even easier for me because you feel, first of all, a little bit less vulnerable because you're embodying a character, and it's an easier cue than asking someone to pose in a certain way or to imitate a reference that you have. So with her, it was, I don't remember exactly what I would say, but I would be like, you are shooting down the patriarchy, like you're this goddess. And I'm very, very expressive when I work. Like sometimes I'm always shooting, like very seriously, but they burst into laughter because I'm like, yes, you're giving me everything I want. And I think that also helps because if the person is not a model, they're always expecting, they want to know it was what they're doing good. It's not. So I found out that talking while you're doing the photos really works, and embodying a character really works because there you have something to grasp onto, So yeah, shoot the patriarchy, like don't let them in, and so it's easier to get into that mood, and it works as a charm if you've had the chance to meet the person previously. I mean, we went all the way to the countryside to do the shoot, so we also had the opportunity to chat in the car. She got to know my mom, so we were in this very intimate space where you can play a character and you don't feel ridiculous, and you just take the cue. And I have and hopefully this is a trick that practical thing that people can try to see if it works for them. But yeah, so it's about, to me, again, it's about criticizing these stages of femininity or of womanhood that we go through, like the famous quinceañera. It's also, this is the the image that I was saying that my mom calls the phallus, which I love. That means that she spent a lot of time with me. And it's my way, this, besides the portraits, doing still lives or doing landscapes like the cave at the beginning, it's also a way of bringing little metaphors, like this softness. Again, to me, it's like a fallen phallus, the softness. Again, this is archival. This is my mom in her first communion. And I thought there was something very powerful about even like, when you make an image into a negative, you invert it. So I even thought that this thing of inversion made a lot of sense. And as my mom said, you transform me into a demon. And I was like, yes. So I like how it went from being something very angelical to having this dark undertone, this dark side, this inversion, because that's what I'm doing at the end with the archival images. Then there's a lot of, I allude a lot to the Bible, because of course, if I'm talking about Catholicism, what I did was like reappropriate the imagery, but to actually criticize it. So this one is the burning bush, because whenever God appears in the Bible and speaks directly, for example, to Moses, he appears as a burning bush. And I like this idea of like, what happens if God is talking but no one is listening? So there is these interpretations, or like when God is gone. So I pair it with this image. This is La Dolorosa. There is there are these images, effigies that they make of virgins crying with her heart, with blades going through it. It's so dramatic. I love the dramatism of Catholicism. Fashion loves the dramatism, but it's about bringing these elements, and it's about, again, to me, it was very important to show Bolivian faces. We have this beauty that is very unique to us as well. And I think that it's super important that as a whole, we start to understand beauty as again, this spectrum, and not just these Eurocentric heteronormative ideas that have been sort of like the rule for so long. And then there's just like little elements that, for example, I wanted to comment on how, like, I think this idea of being a virgin is like so outdated. So I took this picture in a antique store. I put her, a person asked me if it was a museum, works the same. Like, I wanted to place her I wanted to put a virgin in a place where you only find outdated old things. It's still around, but it's like outdated. And there, I think you can see the fashion, because she's wearing like combat boots. So it's always about mixing and matching, like the past, the present, something more traditional with something more contemporary. Again, this reflection, like, what does a modern Bolivian virgin look like? What does a Mary Magdalene look like? And for me, this is even political, because I believe that trans women are women. I know that even within feminism, we are split, unfortunately, on these issues. And I was thinking, like, a trans woman is definitely a Magdalene of our times. She's fighting to be even considered a legitimate part of society. She's many times like an outcast. So this is a lot of reflecting, on my heritage, on my identity. I love this play, like putting a trans woman next to a nun, next to an old photo of an old girls' Catholic school. I like this friction of confronting you, because all these women, even this very severe looking nun, like, her sense of femininity is just as valid as this trans woman, but mm, I think there is something when you bring these images together, or this image which is very again, that's why I call my work docufiction. I am talking about the oppression of women, but I like to produce images like this that are, like a complete construction, a complete fiction. But I am trying to talk about something real. Here it was about how, as women, we can also be very masculine. So I'm taking this element, the wool, which is very traditionally masculine, and have her wear it, you know. Um, Again, the man as the head of the household, we say that a lot. But in Latin American culture, men are very absent figures. So the same way that I saw men torn off from my family album, I did the same. It's less violent because I did it digitally, but it's my way of saying, like we call the man the head of the household when he's really sometimes not even there. And I loved in this picture in particularly, I loved how miserable she looks. I mean, they back then they didn't take a lot of pictures, so this was like her only wedding picture, and she doesn't look very happy. So, it was a lot of fun selecting the images as well. And then again, like it was important. This is a documentary image. I think because of how it's shot, it looks fictional or mythological, but actually I took this during a procession, during a religious procession, and these women dance on the street. But it's, again, I like that some people look at my images and interpret some as, very documentary when they are constructed, and they look at constructed images and cannot and think they are documentary. And for now, there are more images, but I will close with this one so that we can look at the others. And going back, to me, it was important to show the diversity, not only with like different ethnic groups and things, but also with age. Because again, like when I talk about the sexist imagery, of course, it's also only, it seems like society only values women when they're young, and they're forgotten or tossed aside when they are older. So it was important for me to try to be as diverse as possible with the women that I was depicting, and to make them. The last thing that I will say is like, I think that there is, to me, the gaze is very important, and most of my pictures, the women are looking straight to the audience. And for this work in particular, I think it's very important because, you can see it in her. Her name is Carmen. She's looking at you and almost like expecting, posing a question, challenging you. And I think it's really important because at the end of the day, I am talking about the oppression of women, but through these very strong, resilient women who never put themselves as the victims. So I like that strength. I like that piercing gaze to, like, how women have been looked at for so long. I wanted my women to return that gaze and be like, I am the one looking at you. I think I'm going to leave it there so that we have enough time.
Of course. Just reflecting on this before we go to the next place, I always like to ask this question: is you put together this series, I can tell your focus. I can see, I think we as an audience got to see kind of how you constructed these images and your intention behind them. When somebody looks at this body of work, what do you want them to take away? What are you trying to say?
I think that the images that I make are more about actually asking questions than providing answers, because I am also asking questions while I'm making this. It's what we were talking about before. I start with an idea. Of what oppression means to me, what femininity is, what does it mean to be a woman in contemporary Bolivian society. And I am talking about all these issues for sure. But to me, it's more about, I'm more interested not in what I have to say, but I'm more interested in what are you getting from these images. And if it's not, and I'm super happy when it actually makes you wonder, even things like, whoa, I've never seen a Bolivian woman before, or I've never seen a Bolivian woman that was, for example, not a cholita, or that was not framed within a more like folkloric context. Wow, I want to know about Bolivia. Like, where is Bolivia? Maybe I cannot even show it on the map, but now I'm looking at these things like, whoa, why is there, why are these women dressed like this? What do they have in their hands? I used to be very afraid of the opacity within images, because when you're doing a work that has a message, which I think mine has a message, it's about, more than a message, of course, I'm dealing with a serious issue. I'm talking about women's place within a society, patriarchal structures. But and of course, I don't want people to not get that. But I'm also learning that, like, one of the most beautiful things about photography at the end of the day, even when it's documentary, is that it always admits opacity. You don't have to understand everything that is going on to get an image, to understand its power. And maybe it is this opacity what gets you to have the questions, like, to me, it was fantastic when you said, like, oh, I knew this image and I wanted to know more. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I'm going for. Like, I would feel super happy if anyone looking at my project, again, like, just wants to learn a little bit more about Bolivia, suddenly wonders about, like, or can see a parallel between maybe a story that they see in one of the images and a story of their own background, or yes, a personal story. So I think that I would say, like, I do think that I am political. I think that I want to be political with what I do, because I do put on my point of view. But at the end, it's not me giving you the answers. No, like, the work, we have to do it, because first of all, I don't have them. I've asked many questions when I did this. I have new ideas, but to me, it's about to ask these questions together, it's to me, it's about this. I love opacity. I love ambiguity now. No, opacity is a better word, because ambiguity is where sometimes things can get muddled. But opacity, you can still see something behind, even if you don't have all the clues. And sometimes if you can see that something there's behind, then you might be the one who's chasing the answers. I mean, you as an audience. And I think that's even better, because it goes back to what we were talking at the beginning, like the power of images to make you reflect. And I think that's something that we should look for, like, to have our audiences think, reflect. Hopefully, no, I think it's very pretentious to say, oh, my images make you think. No, but hopefully they raise questions. I expect them to raise questions more than to give answers.
I think it's interesting. And this is my last question here, do you feel like you're trying to have a conversation with where you're from? You're like trying to have a conversation with Bolivia itself? You're like turning the mirror back on where you're from? It's like in a lot of ways, in a camera, you're kind of, we had this conversation as you're trying to find either a mirror or a window. Are you trying to do this at a larger scale, with the place that you call home, or where you're from?
For sure. I think to this day, I am the project helped so much. It helped me so much to reconnect to my Bolivian heritage, but I still struggle a lot with my identity. Even with things like sometimes I feel a little bad, because I feel that this project has had a lot of visibility outside Bolivia and not as much within. And sometimes I feel like a traitor. Some people in Bolivia have told me that my work is very European, and I tell them, I understand what you mean completely. Like, I'm the first to say I learned about image making outside of Bolivia. So of course it's going to be informed by that. But it it causes my identity is a conflict for me. It still is. I don't think I'm the only one. I think it becomes more and more conflictive now because, my grandma didn't leave Bolivia until she was like 70 something years old when we went all together for a holiday. I am 32 years old and I have lived in like 4 different countries already that speak different languages, that have different cultures. And I think forever I am from Bolivia, and I think and it's super important to have roots, with another metaphor, like the deeper the roots are, the bigger the tree can grow. And I definitely like this project has helped me ground my roots and connect to them and feel how strong they are. But I see so many of my friends with the same conundrum as me, like I live in so many places. I consider myself from so many places. What weight does the place where I was born have in who I am, how I am? Again, like it's very interesting because I talk about this work a lot with non-Bolivian people. Mm-hmm. So it's always, sometimes it causes a conflict within myself. But again, I don't think that conflicts or feeling uncomfortable is a bad thing. I think that's if you're a bit uncomfortable, if you're a bit challenged, you're probably in a good place, because that's where growth happens. That's where understanding can happen. Now when I talk about my work, I like to use the word friction as well, because again, I think that I come from fashion. I love like a pleasant image. I love, but to me, I was telling you before, I'm a very political person. So I think it's about the friction. It's about this, I'm just circling back, but it's about feeling uncomfortable. It's about, and going back to the last question, I don't have the answers. I still struggle a bit with my identity, but photography is definitely a tool that helps me deal with these anxieties. It's a tool that helps me address these questions that I have. And it's always looking within, even if you're looking out with the camera, you're always looking within.
I've really enjoyed kind of dissecting that last series. Is there any artist that you feel is like influential to you, someone that you're looking at that kind of inspires you today?
Well, okay, that's a big question, I feel, because I think that if I name my influences, I have many. Like in terms of for sure. Like, and I can go back to old masters. Like I will forever say Nan Goldin to me. But you see, it's this silly thing because how is she not influential, and how many photographers will not name her? But I bring her up because not only is there a rawness, a sense of urgency in what she does, but I also like it very much in how, very recently she decided not to do this project with the New York Times because she doesn't want to align herself right now with a publication that is perhaps not doing great in terms of how they are informing people about our current situation and the war that is happening. And that takes so much strength. You can say like, oh, she's well positioned, they can call her again. But, you also learn now that now that I am getting to be part of this world and meeting people, not everyone is always aligned, like their life is not always aligned with the ideology that they present through their images. So to me, that makes her like even more admirable, because it's not only the images that she makes, but it's like how she feels, and both are completely aligned. And to me, that is worth of praise. But I would also say, because I have many influences, like I get a lot of influences that are not, many of my influences come from literature or cinema. I love cinema. I'm a cinephile. For example, another big influence for me has been Lucrecia Martel. I really love Lucrecia Martel. Is an Argentinian filmmaker. I came really late to her. I saw her movies, all her movies, in a single weekend, because I saw one and I was like, oh my God, who is this person? Like, why hadn't I seen her before? And I like, for example, with Lucrecia Martel, there is a lot of opacity, even ambiguity with her. But I love how she plays with these double-edged swords, how something that looks very innocent can, in a second, become very ominous. I like how she plays with that. Another big influence is Chris Kraus. She's a writer, and I think she's from Australia originally. And I remember reading her very famous book, I Love Dick, which is actually like, it's very difficult to define what the book is, because it's like an autofiction, because it's an autobiography, but it's mixed with fiction. There's also, throughout the book, you have these very academic essays that are reflections on Katie Ackerman, Simone Weil. So I loved how, first of all, how she brings all these things together, like it made me less afraid of mixing languages, being syncretic, because, why does a work have to be just one thing when it can be so many? If you have the way of putting it together, you don't have to limit yourself. And I love that about Chris Kraus. And I also love the fact that she wasn't afraid to show you her bad side, like she's someone who made her obsessive nature, which is something that I am very obsessive, which I would try to hide. She's very unapologetic about it. And I'm trying to learn that as a person, as a very exuberant person. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm like this. But no, like, she's unapologetically obsessive, but that doesn't make her, and she's stupid about guys, but that doesn't make her less of a feminist or of a smart woman. And I think like having those references helps me not only in my work, but also like in my life, like how I am and what I try to be. So yeah, I'm naming just a few because difficult question over there. But then I'm gonna name one more person. And I know, because I have so many, there are some, no, I'm not going to name anyone else, because if I start naming some photographer friends that I have right now that are doing amazing work, we're going to be here days and days.
Well,
I'm just going to stick with three.
I'll just give you one last question. So we'll wrap it up with that. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to the rest of the work because we're out of time. But we'll have you on again. But last question. It's for anyone that's made it this far and loves your work. Do you have any advice for people that are getting into photography, getting into image making, getting into the art world? What would your big advice be for them getting started?
Oh, okay. I have a big advice. My biggest advice is do it. And I mean, Shia LaBeouf has become like a very weird character now. But there is
the meme where he's yelling, "Do it!" Yeah, that one.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But like, I would play that. I would play that to my students, like, do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. because I think it sounds very basic. It sounds like even non-advice, but it is the biggest advice because
Yeah.
do you want to be a photographer? Great. Then start.
Yeah.
Grab a camera. Sometimes we get so in our head, oh, but I don't have the means, but I live in Bolivia, it's so far away. But you know what? Unless you don't, I also say this. Many people have cell phones, that's a perfect place to start. You don't have to have the most advanced camera. Oh, I want to do work on dogs. Perfect. Then start your research, or maybe you don't do research. So just go to dog shows and start shooting. I am someone who went to school, who did the whole academic thing, and I think there is a very big value to that. But nobody can teach you how to be a photographer. Nobody can teach you how to be an artist. So you just have to do it. And now where I am, it's very interesting because I find many people that are in a similar stage of their photography as me. And when you talk, we have all arrived to this stage in different ways and from different places. So there is not a formula, but what speaks for you, your work. And how do you make work? By doing it, by simply doing it. Because we get paralyzed. I got paralyzed so many times. And it's just, just grab your camera, go outside. Oh, I don't have an ocean. What do you gravitate towards? Because at the end of the day, photography is only a way of seeing. That you refine, that you polish, that maybe you focus, but it's a way of seeing. So now that we are so inundated with images, with like the viewpoints of others, that would be another thing. Try to be as true to yourself as you can. Oh, I always say, like, I love Stanley Kubrick films. I would never make a Stanley Kubrick film. That's not me. Like, I'm so chaotic. I'm so not epic, So yes, you can love someone. You can want to make photos like them, but the success will come if you make photos like you. And actually, that like you is not easy to find. You will have to peel a lot of these other viewpoints that we acquire because, we're doom scrolling all day. But how do you get rid of that as well? Working. So yeah, what is my advice? Do it.
Do it. That's
Just
awesome.
That's
really awesome. I just enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for your time, and please share with everyone how people can find your work and engage with you. This is where you can tell us what your website is and where we can find you on Instagram. Feel free. Tell us how we can find you.
I have a good one because I think this will make it easier. If you Google Marisol Mendez Bolivia, you will probably find me. But my Instagram is Marisol __ Mendez, and my website is Marisol -Mendez. So really trying to keep it simple. But if you Google Marisol Mendez photography, it probably will lead you there to my website or my Instagram. Bolivia, that always helps. That's a good thing. That still to this day, like maybe you cannot do that in the US, but in Bolivia you can still do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I highly recommend going and checking out her website. She has two projects that I thought were really, really strong. And we didn't have enough time to get to them today, but maybe we'll have you on next time. But thank you again for joining us on the Urbanaut Podcast. And thank you, everyone, for staying along this long. If you like content like this, share, and also subscribe to our channel. And to support us, we have a Patreon. So go to our Patreon as well to basically help us keep bringing you content like this. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.